Compassion is more powerful than violence. It will make you act in ways that you never saw possible. And I was so desperate to get to my friends and to save them. And the sad thing is that I was recognized for saving hundreds of people, but the people that I really wanted to help, I never was able to save a single one of them. I lost 200 friends on 9/11. A lot of people call me a conspiracy theorist. And it's funny because I was there. I am an eyewitness. I experienced the event. I do not speculate because I experienced it in my own skin. I have the people that have come out and validated the story constantly. I have the people that have survived also the event and have tried to tell their part of the story, which actually coincide with mine. I lost 200 friends that do not have answers, and I will continue until we get the answers.
My name is Anthony Saltalamacchia. My position was morning supervisor from the hours of 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. I would supervise over 100 workers and designate their work for the day. On the morning of September 11th, I was in my office. I was just getting the work handed out to all the employees when I received a phone call from William Rodriguez saying that he wasn't going to make it into work that day. I then kind of pleaded with him to come into work because his job is very, how could you say, difficult, to where he had to clean 110 floors of stairs, and not too many people are up for that challenge. So, you know, I kind of persuaded him to come in and get the job done. So I then waited for him for his arrival. Upon waiting, he then came in. We then were, talking about the day's work and what needed to be done when we heard a massive explosion that was in the World Trade Center at about 8:46 a.m. in the morning. The explosion came from, I believe, at first we believed that it came from the mechanical room. And then we heard a series of other explosions that sounded up on the above levels of the building, to where we then realized that there was something wrong and there was a major problem. And about, I'd say, 14 to 15 people came running and screaming into our office. We then got together as a group, and William kind of basically got everybody settled down, tried to help everybody relax. Then right after that, the floor started shaking. The tile from above, which was above us, started coming down, falling on us, and we knew that there was something seriously wrong happening. A man came into the office. He was a black man, very shaky, very in shock. He had multiple wounds. His arms were bleeding. Skin was peeling off. You could just see basically his flesh. It was a very tough thing to see. Then William grabbed a cloth and wrapped it around him. And at the time, nobody really wanted to go near him because he was just covered in blood. But William did what he had to do and get him to safety. And as we're standing there, more explosions were happening, a lot of screaming, confusion. And then William said, that it's time, we have to get out of the building. In that manner, all of us departed out. It was very smoky, very cloudy. It just looked like very serious, that we knew that we had to get out of the building. We then ran towards the truck dock area, which was pretty much our only way out, because in the beginning William led us to the fire escape, which led us to the lobby, but that was completely under smoke and it just was a bad situation, so we went the opposite way towards the truck dock, carrying this man with us. We then got to the truck dock, ran up the truck dock, and got outside. Finally, I'm not sure of what time that was, but we then saw the ambulance, and William and Kenny directed the man, carried him over to the ambulance, and made sure that he got to safety. I remember Willie wanted to go back into the building. I told him, no, stay out here with me. Let's get things more, let's get everybody together, get everybody calmed down. He just refused and was, screaming, we have to go back in the building. We have to go back. I'm sure he had a lot of ties to a lot of people in there, and he wanted to make sure that they were all right. So I, did my best to try and persuade him to stay, with us and, be safe, but he just didn't listen and ran back into the building. I remember him running back into the building. I don't remember seeing him after that. I knew that he was in there, And funny thing is that when I got home later that night, I seen him on television on the news. He had like he was covered in all the dust and everything. And I was like, wow, that's the guy who I was with when the explosion happened. And I knew then he was okay, which made me feel better. So, but at first, yes, I did think that something terrible happened to him, because I remember him running running back into the building, and that was the last I saw of him. The amount of explosions I've heard from 8:46 to the time we get out was so many, at least 10. It was just like multiple explosions to where I felt like there was different grenades. That's what it sounded like. It was just different grenades being set off like in the building. It was like, there was one major explosion, and then there was different explosions throughout that period of time until we got out. So I believe 6 years after 9/11, I don't know the truth. That I don't believe a word that they say. That I just don't. I don't believe everything that they say. I think is a cover-up.
I studied physics at MIT. I did electrical engineering for about 8 years. I've had quite a bit of practical engineering experience. When I first saw the collapses, I was absolutely convinced that they were not spontaneous. One of the first things that I did was to speak with one of my patients, who is a retired Army Corps of Engineers fellow who's done a lot of demolition and construction. Showed him some of the public source videos that are available of it, and he immediately pointed out that there were squibs, which represent little puffs of smoke essentially coming out of the buildings initially, which were clearly a sign of controlled demolition. He had no opinions beyond that, but he said without doubt that it was a controlled demolition. That sort of set me on the path of continuing to examine it and trying to gather as much evidence as I could. And the question I pose, what don't we know and why don't we know it, is sort of addressing the fact that at this point we still do not really have a meaningful explanation for what happened to the buildings. We have had several studies at this point, which I will go into, as to trying to determine a plausible scenario for the collapse. As of this point, none of them have presented us with anything that I think could be reasonably called a convincing and detailed account of why the collapses occurred. And the question that's been addressed previously, the enormous destruction of physical evidence, as Chris was saying, the site was scrubbed very thoroughly. Out of the entire mass of the buildings that were destroyed, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, who are now doing the ongoing investigation, managed to save about 240 pieces out of the entire building. All of the rest of it was basically recycled. The obvious question is what does it mean that there was a controlled demolition? At the simplest level, it means that someone had a lot of access to the buildings over a long enough period of time to set this up. It implies, as many other things have tonight, that the people who had effective control of the site had an interest in having it scrubbed and making sure that no information was available, that a forensic reconstruction couldn't be done. Even in much smaller catastrophes, we typically will reconstruct things as completely as possible. For example, TWA Flight 800 pieces were dredged off the bottom of the sea. A complete reconstruction was done to allow a detailed analysis. In this case, the exact opposite was done. The first report that was really issued on this was issued by FEMA in collaboration with the American Society of Civil Engineers. There was basically a volunteer team from ASCE that had very limited access to the site. A lot of the pieces that they were able to retrieve were retrieved by going to landfills and trying to find interesting pieces before they were disposed of. The initial FEMA report basically acknowledged that the kerosene would have burned off very quickly. What wasn't destroyed in the initial fireball would have been consumed fairly rapidly and would have only really served as an ignition for the rest of the material. And the second point being that the fuel here really was strictly office contents. If you think of a modern office with copying machines, computers, and as has been previously mentioned, the smoke, particularly from Building 2, just before it collapsed, was very black looking. This is generally an indication of an inefficient fire in which there is not enough oxygen for the amount of fuel. These types of fires typically burn very cool. They are not hot flames like blowtorches.